get introductory remarks briefly from them before we get to the first story that will set as a segue for our discussion this morning. Tina Council, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you and welcome.
Mheshimiwa, thank you for joining us as well. It's a beautiful day. We look forward to a robust, engaging discussion this morning. Right, Kenyans should expect more economic pain as the country descends further into debt distress in 2024. Analysts from the Institute of Public Finance of Kenya say that the country has breached the upper threshold of critical debt sustainability, meaning it is walking a repayment tightrope. According to the experts, though Kenya is not expected to default on its debt, ensuring timely payments will remain a painful exercise for all citizens. KTN's Kelvin has more.
At the launch of a report on the state of the country's revenues, taxes and economy by the Institute of Public Finance of Kenya, its CEO James Muraguri noted that a source of major concern for experts is the debt distress occasioned by the repayment of the $2 billion Eurobond. It is now emerging that continued repayment of the Eurobond will have critical implications for the economy, especially in terms of the huge withdrawal of dollars at a time that Kenya is experiencing an economic crisis which has been made worse by the move in the Finance Act of 2023 to levy incremental taxes, which has pushed up the cost of living.
We are looking at the consequences of repayment of the Eurobond. That's one thing. And what that means for the economy. Remember, that's a very huge cash outflow from the economy in terms of dollars. However, as you notice, this January, the IMF has replenished our accounts, and we are currently at some very good, decent levels, the current account in terms of import covers.
It is projected that Kenya will still be in breach of the upper limit until at least 2027, even if IMF reclassifies Kenya as a country with a high debt carrying capacity.
Fiscal consolidation comes at a pain, and what does this mean? Are we anticipating potentially that there could be service, default, service delivery default by government as we work towards consolidating our resources to be able to meet our debt obligations?
IPF insists that the government needs to raise new and additional concessional financing, here read as cheaper and longer term loans, in order to repay the Eurobond. This is, however, constrained by the high interest rates being levied on borrowers internationally, which stands at above 15%, making it difficult to refinance at such a high cost.
So we have put our expenditure high up, and so has our revenue. And that means our revenue correction model needs to be looked at. We need to ask a question: is government committed, for example, to have a zero-based budget? Or we know we have an incremental budget that moves like 10% every year. And those are the questions we need to ask.
The Institute has suggested several alternatives to the current situation, saying government should explore refinancing locally and also try to lobby concessional lenders for assistance so as to minimize future debt servicing costs. Nyakundi Kelvin, KTN News.
Now, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has directed the National Treasury to fast-track the payment of pending bills for counties that have accumulated to close to 170 billion shillings, driving the counties to a cash crisis. Speaking at his current residence when he chaired the 22nd ordinary session of Intergovernmental Budget Economic Council, IBEC, the DP said the delays in the disbursement has slowed down economic growth and the matter will be resolved in the next 1 week. As Emmanuel Toh now reports, the Council of Governors has proposed to receive 439.5 billion shillings as an equitable share to counties for the financial year 2024-2025, an increase that has been fiercely opposed by the national government.
The current cash crunch caused by the ballooning pending bills among the 47 devolved units dominated the discussions in the 22nd ordinary session of the Intergovernmental Budget Economic Council (IBEC), held at the Deputy President's residence in Karen, Nairobi on Monday.
I wish to emphasize our commitment to the timely disbursement of funds to counties. We are nearly up to the date for December 2023. Despite this, I strongly urge you to fast-track payments of pending bills. Indeed, we should not be having pending bills for the last financial year.
The pending bills have consistently been a thorn in the flesh for the counties, with Nairobi County bearing the brunt, accounting for close to 110 billion shillings of the debt, which is 65% of the pending bills owed to counties.
Prompt payments for goods and services releases funds to our business people and spurs economic growth, especially the hustler nation, for a better and vibrant economy. Let money circulate.
The meeting also resolved to form a committee comprising COG, CRA, the National Treasury, and IBEC to examine the equitable shareable revenue proposals and conclude within a week. Counties had initially stuck to their guns on an increment of the current 385 billion shillings to 450 billion shillings in the next financial year.
What came in from Treasury was counties were to get 391 billion. The Commission of Revenue Allocation recommended 395. What was proposed by the Council of Governors was that this should be 450 billion. So there's quite a big of a variance. However, out of that 450, there was 10 billion that was meant to be for roads. So we're looking at about almost 439.5 is what the Council of Governors has recommended.
Itabidi itafika wakati tunaangalia wafanyikazi katika county, ushuru wanaotozwa, na basi tukachukua kiwango cha zile pesa na serikali kuu ikachukua kiwango kingine.
The meeting also agreed that the counties that had evaluated and verified their pending bills can process payments without reference to the Office of the Auditor General, and that counties will engage directly with the service providers and negotiate new contractual agreements on the issue of the medical equipment service program. The National Treasury has also committed to clear December 2023 disbursements to counties of shareable revenue within the next 2 weeks.
It's not a joke. When you have a county like right now, if you include February, we would be behind by close to about 1.9 billion. And then you have to pay your suppliers, you have to pay everyone salaries.
The national government also announced that as of January 24th, the National Treasury had disbursed a total of 160 billion Kenyan shillings, which translates to 41.5% of the total equitable share of 385.4 billion Kenyan shillings due to the county governments this financial year. Governors, however, complained that they will not be able to tax their constituents more to increase their source revenue collection, saying the new tax measures introduced by the national government were burden enough.
Mtu ambaye anaitisha own source revenue ni yule ambaye pia serikali inamuitisha ushuru. Yule mwananchi mmoja ndiye tunamsukuma hadi anainua mikono. County inamuitisha fedha hizi, serikali kuu yamuitisha fedha hii, kuna ushuru.
Emmanuel To, KTN News, Nairobi.
And a large number of Kenyans graduating from universities and technical colleges lack skills that will enable them to get jobs in the international labor market. Despite the efforts of the Kenya Kwanza government to promote the labor migration project, the key issue troubling stakeholders, including employment agents, is that Kenyans seeking jobs lack the critical education to be productive in the digital economy.
President William Ruto has been at the forefront advocating for the project of sending Kenyans abroad to seek jobs, this being his alternative way to fulfill his election promises.
I have signed a bilateral agreement with Saudi, UAE, with Germany, with Canada, and many other countries. We are exploring possibilities. And for your information, as a result of what I have been doing, between now and next month, January, the first 10,000 Kenyans will be leaving to go and work in foreign countries so that they can support themselves and support Kenya, because many countries have established a strategy on how to grow their foreign exchange earnings.
But the president's efforts to solve the unemployment problem have been dealt a blow, as players in the job market have expressed frustration that job seekers lack adequate skills.
As we go knocking doors abroad, for these opportunities to be opened up to our Kenyan youth, it is imperative, it is critical that we know the kind of skills that obtain in our country.
According to Labour Secretary Shadrach Madime, job opportunities exist, but only for those who meet employers' requirements abroad.
Some of our graduates are not able to meet the requirements of some of the industries that we have. It is critical then that we do an analysis and see where there are gaps, so that we can be able to address these gaps comprehensively together with the educational institutions that we have.
Kenyans who have trained in medicine, nursing, engineering, architecture, agriculture, banking, teaching, transportation, and we also have skilled artisans that can be able to work in the construction sites in the Kingdom of Saudi. We are working towards integrating our system known as the near aims into the Muslim-led system, so that we can work together even better. The system has reduced the cost of recruitment. It has also created transparency and eliminated any brokers and middlemen in the recruitment process. So through this system, we are able to trace the journey of a migrant worker, right from when we identify them from here until the process is done, until they are sent to your country for work.
Following the president's directive, the Labour Ministry launched a portal where Kenyans, especially the youth who are most affected, have been urged to register to enable the government assess their capabilities in various sectors.
The reason why we want to collect this data is basically to ensure that our young people then gain employment. As I said, not only locally, but also abroad. If it is locally, it's in terms of where there are gaps, so that we can sit with the educational institutions and advise them on how they should go about addressing those gaps, so as to produce polished, graduates who will then be able to fit into the market, without the challenges that we're facing as it is currently.
All eyes are now on the government to see if this new initiative will provide a lasting solution.
President Ruto, he has called for unity in the Africa Union to push for more reforms in the multilateral development system. President Ruto, who is currently attending the ongoing Italy-Africa Summit in Rome, stressed the need for Africa to position itself and be part of Kenya decisions in the globe. Among the issues, he's consolidating the efforts to resolve conflicts in the East African region, including Sudan, DRC, and Somalia. The Italy-Africa Summit aims at boosting multilateral relations in areas such as food security, vocational training, energy, and infrastructure.
Morning, welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
The President of the Republic of Kenya.
It's great to be in your country. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, we want to buckle down to a discussion right now, and just looking at the editorial cartoons, this has been one of the issues as well, ticket issue that everyone has been talking about, especially on social media, since we had that particular broadside. Was it a sentiment or declaration? We might as well, be now churning out some more money from Kenyans for the road toll, and this is for the maintenance and the road levy. This was what was tripping off the tongue of the CS of Transports, Kipchumba Murkomen. This is what Victor has drawn today in the Daily Nation. We have ozone as well. Litmus test, and this is a housing levy that we had a determination from the courts declaring it unconstitutional, and this is what has been captured there by Ozone inside the Star this morning. What is the way forward? And in the Standard today, this is what GAMS has drawn, and this is all about bursaries. The CS seems to be saying there is no cause for alarm, but there appears to be a cash crunch as far as even capitation is concerned, and you can see Wanjiku there trying to reach for the scholarship billions there, and she has her leg, a ball and chain there. Good marks, but some of the students also, the pupils are missing, or they are lacking fees to join secondary school. We just want to begin the discussion this morning by looking critically on the state of affairs of the economy as it is, with a warning that we could be facing an unrest. That is according to World Bank, if anything is to go by when you look at the Standard this morning. Experts, Eurobond debt to make or break the economy. Let's just begin there, but let's get the highlights of the week that has been, and getting introductory remarks also from our panelists. We begin with you, Senior Counsel Jabura, Dr. Otena Molo. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us. We just want to begin maybe not from where we have this splash on the Eurobond and the debt distress that we will be facing, or we could be facing as a country, as it's being projected by the analysts there. But from last week, especially on Friday, and looking at the housing levy debate, everyone was expecting to have a determination from the courts. Now it has declared that unconstitutional. Moving forward, what are you reading from your tea leaves?
Well,
if you have some tea there.
First, I'm glad to be here. It's not an easy morning because, you know, some of us football lovers stay up until about 2 a.m. And I was up watching Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire.
Unfortunately.
A very thrilling match. I don't know why you're saying unfortunately, because for me, I think Cote d'Ivoire deserved to win.
Okay. I thought maybe Senegal was your...
No. Senegal is a good team, but Cote d'Ivoire, as the host country, we need it to remain in the games for the games to be thrilling. Otherwise, people lose interest.
The entertainment value of it,
yes. Lately, they've been quite down, and for them to pick up and beat Senegal as they did, I think it was deserved. My own team of choice for now is DRC, and it's not just because they are our neighbors in the region, but I think that they have quite a strong team, relatively speaking. But that's a story for another day.
So it's not from a sympathetic point of view, DRC.
Well, that too, but not only for that reason.
I can't see Congo's eyes if they're red. It seems you just slept through the night.
I watched the earlier game, the one of Cape Verde. I think was it Mauritania, which ended 1-0 in favor of Cape Verde. The one Otenda Molo is talking about, I left it when it was 1-0, because I couldn't stay beyond midnight. So I'm pleasantly surprised that Cote d'Ivoire recovered and beat.
For you, this was
Senegal.
Done and dusted. You knew.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw it 1-0 and the way the game was developing, I thought it's already bagged. I thought it was.
So you're surprised?
Senegal. I'm pleasantly surprised that Cote d'Ivoire won. Was it 2-1 or what were the scores?
Ultimately, it was in penalties. 1-1, then it went to penalties. Okay, so they won 5-4 on penalties.
It's a very hard work in Kenya. You must have stayed beyond 1 a.m.
But you know, he has to borrow. He's the captain of Bunge, so he has to borrow some tactics out there and see what is the latest move that we have. Fancy footworks, right? Mushimo, you didn't watch?
No, I didn't.
All right.
So I am the only authority on football. If you have any question, please ask me. Now, back to your original question.
Yes, please.
In terms of the finding of the court, first, the High Court made its findings, and I was one of the advocates in the matter. This regime was dissatisfied. They went on appeal to the Court of Appeal and sought to get a stay of the orders of the High Court. So in truth, the Court of Appeal is yet to make a substantive finding on the appeal. But as to whether it should stay the decisions of the High Court any further, the Court of Appeal found that the interest of justice were better served by not granting a stay. Because if ultimately it agrees with the High Court, then you cannot levy this, housing taxes. But if it does not, then it can, the government can start levying the taxes, and if it needs be, it can still levy retrospectively. And of course, that's the right thing to do. I think I was on this show 2 weeks ago when I was castigating the regime for threatening, the judiciary, and I said that even the grant of stay was actually bending over backwards because it was not in tandem with previous decisions of the court in terms of stay. But I think the finding of the court should be seen in the grand scheme of things, not just in terms of affordable housing, but in terms of other policy decisions that have been made and implemented by this regime without a proper legal foundation or engagement. And that will include the social health insurance fund scheme, the question of the CASS, the chief administrative secretaries, the question of deployment of the police to Haiti, and others which didn't even come. You will remember there was also the question of deployment of the armed forces to the North Rift, and which, when it came to Parliament, I pointed out that that was actually unlawful. And what they then tried to do is what they've tried to do in Haiti in an inverted manner. In Haiti, the only entities that can be deployed should be the, armed forces, with appropriate approval of Parliament, not the police.
Not the police, okay.
But internally, you cannot deploy the armed forces. You can only deploy the police. So in North Rift, when there's a problem, they deployed the armed forces, but purported that they were under the command of the police, which even constitutionally and legally is not possible. So the problem here is we have a regime that establishes its policies and wants to run roughshod over everyone, including Parliament, including the judiciary, including the people of Kenya, as long as it can achieve its purposes. And it ends up in a situation where you are essentially involving in a Ponzi scheme where funds are concerned and in an illegality where policies are concerned. Ponzi schemes, because at the end of the day, the housing issue, for example, you will find there are so many issues. The only one that people so far talk about is the fact, and we pointed this out, that they were seeking to just drop it in the finance bill, which is the Finance Act, without a proper legal foundation. Now that's what the courts have strongly pointed out. But there are so many things around it, including, and Mheshimiwa here was in Parliament, you will know, even the process, we are yet to fully examine the illegality of the process and all the other issues around it. Even the question of how you can end up with such a scheme in the Finance Act when it was not fully considered in the appropriations bill, which then was should have been the foundation. So you have all these schemes that are essentially supposed to operate outside the normal constitutional channels. The affordable housing scheme, without a proper legal foundation, so how are you collecting it? Who's basically consolidating it? Is it coming to the consolidated fund? And if it is, how will it be removed? The same issues you will find around the so-called Hustler Fund. The legalities of that Hustler Fund are even worse than this one of the affordable housing. If you look at now what's starting to develop in terms of social health insurance fund, then you see that it was not a meaningful improvement of NHIF and the whole health scheme. It is essentially a way of introducing private players to regulate public money in terms of health. Now, that is just another Ponzi scheme. You go to the so-called G2G deal, oil deal, which for the longest time we made noise, we said it was inappropriate, it was not going to be helpful, it should be made known to Kenyans. To date, it's never been made known. And every time an issue arose, the president himself said that if you want a copy of the deal, Just go to Parliament. Parliament has it. Parliament does not have it, and I've said this 4 times on this show. It has never come to Parliament. All that you get are tidbits of saying now we have cancelled it, and the cancellation is in tandem with the agreement. How can you know it's in tandem when you've never seen the agreement? So this whole thing reveals a government that I think the Daily Nation has essentially captured it on the front page. You know, everything is broken, and it's continuing to break. And the result of this broken system is Kenyans are suffering, they are being dehumanized, and we are shuttling towards collapse.
Right, we're shuttling towards collapse. I think momentarily we'll be calling it just for a short break. But let me just drop in Mheshimiwa Hassan on this as well, looking at, is it a broken system as is being purported here? Is it all gloom and doom? Looking at the Eurobond, the specter of us also going into a distress. We just ran our viewers by that particular story from the Economist and the analysts. They're saying, of course, we are on that brink, we're on the threshold. We've had $941 million from the IMF, and this was a relief for us that we're going maybe to offset this particular debt distress that we are in. But it seems even that one is a drop in the ocean at the end of the day.
Well, we do have a problem when it comes to debt, and this is a historical problem. If you look at this is something that has accumulated over years, and obviously we do not have the necessary resources to be able to repay them, and that's why I think there is an attempt to getting the IMF to help us out. And it's not free money, it's money that is brought in as a loan. So there are a lot of things that the government needs to do, and there's a lot of issues that it needs to address. For example, most of what has been mentioned here, these bills that have been brought one after the other, from the decisions that have been made by the judiciary, it's obvious that there hasn't been a thorough analysis and a thorough debate of those bills when they were brought to Parliament. And to a certain extent, Parliament takes part of the responsibility. But overall, I think, unless we're able to control our expenditure, and this is something that I've said quite a number of times, is that we're living beyond our means. And when you live beyond your means, somehow, somewhere, time catches up with you. Because there is the payback time. And I think because we have overspent, we have a lot of wastage, we have a lot of leakages, we have a lot of corruption, eventually the system cannot sustain itself unless something drastic is done. And I don't see this cut in expenditure in government spending. The government continues to spend. Travel expenses are the same. If you go to government offices, there's a lot of extravagant expenditure. There is no attempt to cut down our costs, state costs. And this is at the taxpayers' expense, as well as it impacts our standing economically, globally, because we are heavily indebted and are not able to pay our debts, and we may end up in default. So obviously there's a task for the current government to fix these problems as quickly as possible and find solutions that would stabilize the country's economy. Otherwise, we would be in a limbo, and maybe we may even be pushed into default.
Pushed into a default. I think looking at some of the international publications and also TV stations, I was watching one that was saying, I don't know how true is that, because I've not seen also the splashes in the publications of Ugandan dailies regarding the Entebbe airport that is now also being, taken by the Chinese because they've not been able to also pay their debt. Do you think that specter is also facing us?
But I think
regarding
that might
our
not
sovereign
be,
assets?
That might not be true. I mean, this idea that China is going to take over the buildings and the constructions they have done is more a propaganda thing that comes mostly from the West, the so-called debt trap. But it may be taken over by a Chinese company to manage it. But The idea that, in fact, the Chinese are taking over buildings or institutions that they have built is really not so accurate. But nevertheless, if you had bought a house on loan and you're not able to repay it, what would the bank do?
Of course, they'll repossess the house.
They would repossess the house. But I don't think that in this particular case, state-to-state loans or end up in kind of a tit-for-tat, like a commercial venture. Eventually, what we need to do is to restructure our loans with the various. And in fact, surprisingly, China is not the largest country in terms of giving us loans. Almost 80% of our loans.
When we have that government-to-government arrangement here, it's not entirely true when you say that it's not like commercial banks and the way they can repossess your assets is because we've seen Sri Lanka.
No, that
right?
Even Sri Lanka is a lie.
Is a lie?
Sri Lanka, the Hambantota port was never repossessed by the Chinese. What had happened is that eventually a Chinese company won the management of that particular port, just as many other ports are run by different countries on a commercial basis. And Sri Lanka's loans are being restructured so that they can extend longer and have some space, because after all, government is there to serve its citizens. It's not there to pay loans and spend money elsewhere. It's supposed to develop education, health services, social services, provide security and protection to the citizens. And that now there isn't sufficient money to do many of those things that the government is supposed to. In terms of development, you're simply spending all your time paying debts. A huge chunk of your income goes to debt. And that is not sustainable. So there must be some solution somewhere. And one of the solutions is debt rescheduling with the particular interested partners, be it the countries or companies, because much of our loans, in fact, are held by from the private sector, not from state to state.
And so we are not even paring down on borrowing, because I think there is an indication that they also are making headroom for 168 billion shillings borrowing. So we're in a rabbit hole, but still continue to dig.
It is disturbing, because I think instead of cutting down, instead of scaling down, and this is the point that I had raised at the very beginning, is that we must begin to think, we must start living within our means. We're using money that we don't have, we're consuming what we don't produce, and to a certain extent something isn't going to work out if we continue on that disastrous path.
Thank you. Right, we're due for a station break right now. It is ticking to 7 o'clock on the nose. And when we circle back, we shall hear from Senate Counsel Okongo Mogeni on this as well. And Mheshimiwa, I know also on this particular podium you had a different view on the housing levy. You're in support of it. I don't know what also will be a reaction regarding the determination by the court moving forward. When we circle back, we shall be interrogating some of these issues that we are facing as a country right now. No monies for the counties, as we've seen. Also, the Council of Governors requesting, they are demanding a more equitable share to the counties. That has been also a catnip issue that has not been resolved up to now. And also we have CRA and the senators also still on the equitable share. They want that also expanded or increased, but that has not been realized so far. What is the way forward? Let's find the answers from the other side of a break.